Brasserie de la Senne, Stouterik.
Life is too short to be drinking shitty beer.
Welcome to another edition of Bands, Bikes and Booze Reviews. Today we have one from Belgium, and it's been ages since I've done a Belgian beer, and I thought it's about time I did one. And I wanted to do a stout for a reason. This is an Irish style stout. I'll get onto that in a bit. But I wanted to cover, now some people, I did put the question out there because some people were saying, or a couple of people said that I ramble on, they don't want to hear the history, they just want me to get on with reviewing the beer, and that's it. So I put the question out, and a lot of people, very kind people, said no, fuck them, keep doing the history, that's what we subscribe for. So that was very kind of you, I do appreciate that, and I do like doing the history, so it's staying. So if you don't like it, just skip forward, alright? But I wanted to highlight the history of stout in Belgium. Now, you might think that stout isn't really a Belgian thing, and that the stouts that they have over there are just mimicking what basically comes from the United Kingdom and possibly further afield as well. But I'm here to tell you that that is not true. The Belgians have had a liking for stout since I'd go out on a limb and I would say the very late 18th century, early 19th century. So what sort of years am I talking about? I'm talking about the late 1790s and the early, from then on basically. And how do I know this and why am I putting that out there? Well, I was reading a story the other day and it really interested me. Cast your mind back to the Napoleonic Wars. Probably you've got no idea what I'm talking about. Well, the Napoleonic Wars took place the late 1700s, early 1800s, and the final battle, probably the most famous battle of the Napoleonic Wars, certainly in the UK, was the defeat of Napoleon at Waterloo. Now, a lot of armies fought at Waterloo. The French fought there, the Poles fought there, the English, or the British as they were then, fought there as well. The Germans or the Prussians fought there. Mind you, there was the King's German Legion as well, fighting with the British, so you could say the Germans as well, and the French, obviously. Now, Waterloo is known as an English victory, but it isn't really. It was a combined victory of the Prussians and the English as well. But there was a little, how can I put this? There was a little anecdote that took place, or a little event that took place, which proves that Guinness was popular in Belgium at the time. And this was the wounding of a member of the 7th Hussars. It was an officer of the 7th Hussars, actually, named William Werner. Now, he was an Irishman. He was from Antrim in the north of Ireland, and he was born in Ireland. His father was an Irish MP, and he was born in the 1700s in Ireland. And he'd obviously gained a liking for Guinness over in Ireland. So when he went over to France with the British Army and was at Waterloo, he was shot in the head by a French musket, and the musket ball hit the side of his if you look at pictures of Hussars, they wear sort of big furry hats. Well, not big, sort of relatively tall furry hats, but they have like a metal chain that goes round as a chin strap. And the bullet hit one of these chin straps, basically saving his life, but obviously injuring him quite badly. And I think there was something like 6,000 soldiers wounded and killed at Waterloo. But his one stands out because he obviously didn't die, but he was taken to hospital because he had a very severe wound on the side of his head. And he was in a very bad way, and he was in hospital recuperating for a few months, and he was gravely wounded. And he did write that when he was started to get better and he was allowed to eat, he had an absolute hankering for Guinness. Now, obviously, if he was Irish, he would have tasted Guinness over in Ireland. But he does claim that Guinness was widely available in Belgium at the time. Belgium, of course, wasn't really a country at the time. Well, yes, I suppose it was. I'm lying, because it was built as a buffer state between France and I think the Netherlands during the Spanish War of Succession. But Guinness was widely available there, and when he was able to, he took a few small doses of Guinness, built his strength up, and eventually increased the doses and made a full recovery. And he lived till he was 86 after a severe wound like that. And Guinness used that as part of their advertising slogan 120 years later. Or they used that anecdote as a part of their advertising 120 years later. But he lived till 86, and I'm sure he enjoyed lots more Guinness during his lifetime. So there you go. So that's my point about proving that Guinness was available in Belgium and it was popular. If you are not convinced, then cast your mind forward 100 years. There was a fella called John Martin. And no, not the John Martin, the folk singer. This fella, he was English, or he had ties to Ireland, basically. Moved over to Europe, Belgium specifically, and he started distributing Guinness. And he is, at the moment, I think, the largest, or no, that's a lie. He was, at one point, the largest distributor of Guinness in Europe. He may still be, I'm not sure. I didn't quite research that one. Do apologise for that, but he also brews a Guinness especially for the Belgian market, and it is very similar to the Guinness Foreign Extra Stout. If you've ever tried that, it's 8%, so it's quite in keeping with some of them Belgian strong ales, and I can see why the Belgians like Guinness, because it is a top fermented beer. And not just Guinness, but the Belgians do have quite a liking for British ales as well. They use British hops in their beer as well, so there are, where there's a bit of a sort of a cut-off between the German style beers and the British style beers, there's a lot of, I wouldn't say crossover, but similarities between British beers and Belgian beers, i.e. the majority are top fermented. They use some kind of sugar in them. They use similar style hops, and I've often said that doubles and even quadruples as well do share quite a lot in common with English old ale and strong ales, so, and barley wines too, especially barley wines. So yeah, I can see the likeness, and I can see why the Belgians do have a taste for British beer. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about this stuff, and this is the Stouterik Irish style stout. It doesn't say that, but that's what it is basically. They call it the Brussels Stout. Now, the reason they call it the Brussels Stout is the brewery is based in Brussels, and it's named after the River Senne, which runs through Brussels. Now, I've been to Brussels, and I'll tell you something, it is not a bad city. I mean, if you like beer, you're going to be in fucking heaven. There's some shops there that look absolutely amazing. I've got a few photos somewhere. If I can dig them out, I'll put them up here. And that's what you're dealing with over there. There's some amazing beers. Beers, even now I look at that photo and there's beers that I haven't seen anywhere apart from there. But there's also a fantastic military museum there. I would go out on a limb and say it's probably one of the best in Europe, arguably the world. There is some absolutely fantastic artefacts there, which range from King Leopold's reign right through up to the modern day. So worth a visit if you go to Brussels. Food's nice. Beer's even better. But this is brewed by the Brasserie de la Senne. They are based in a suburb called Molenbeek in Brussels, and they've been going since 2010. Now, they originally did form a bit earlier, but they didn't have premises, and they used to, I think it was, what was the brewery? There was a Brussels brewery. It might have been the Cantillon brewery. I think that's the only other Brussels brewery. That's a lambic brewery. But there was also one other that they used. So basically they were doing what's known as being a cuckoo brewer, i.e. they were going into other people's established breweries, bringing their own ingredients with them and brewing their own beer. Then eventually in 2010 they got their own place, which was an old disused industrial bakery. They've converted that into a brewery now, and they produce, I think it's 18,000 hectolitres a year, and they do limit their exports. So if you're going to have some of their beer, you've got to be a bit lively. Now, the other beer that I have reviewed from these was the Taras Bulba beer. I don't know whether you've seen that review, but if you do, have a look on if you haven't, have a look on the channel. I quite enjoyed that. That was a nice beer. So there you go. If this is as nice as that, then this is going to be a good one. So let's shut up and investigate this beer. Right, this is a 330ml bottle. It is 5%. And the ingredients on here are water, malted barley, I cannot fucking see this, hops, fermentable sugar and yeast. And there's something else in there. Barley, oh yeah. Yeah, water, barley, malted barley, hops, fermentable sugar and yeast. I'd love to know what that fermentable sugar is. Could it be candy sugar? I don't know. I always thought that the Belgians use candy sugar. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they use cane sugar. Sometimes they use an invert sugar. But there you go. That's what this is. Let's get it open and let's see what's going on. Now, I got this from the House of Trembling Madness, and I got a load of other beer with it as well. A load of German beer and a few Belgian beers as well. So you're probably going to be seeing a lot of German stuff come up on the channel. But there you go. Let's get it open. Now I have to say, this is probably my first Belgian stout. I wonder what this is going to taste like. Now they say it's in the style of an Irish stout. And the brewery also say they have got a style of theirs where they put a lot of emphasis on the bitterness in beers. So again, Irish stout, one of the characteristics is its bitterness, unless of course you're talking Murphy's, which is quite sweet. I really want to try and get hold of some Murphy's, but it's impossible to get down here. I just cannot see it. You'd think it'd be easy to get, but it really isn't. Anyway, let's get the aromas on this. Oh yeah, that is very intense and quite sweet. You can almost smell that sweetness, and in fact it's reminding me of the Guinness Foreign Extra. So I'm wondering whether they've well, it would do, wouldn't it, because it's got sugar in. The Guinness Foreign Extra that you get over here, sometimes they brew it with there's an African sugar that for the life of me I can't remember what the name of it is, but there's an Indian sugar as well called jaggery which they use, and that's used in the stuff you get over here. And it smells very much like that Foreign Extra stout, which is nice. I really like that. I thought that was a great beer. But at 8%, you've got to go easy on it. You can't fucking neck them like you would a normal Guinness. And I've seen them in the shop. They've got them in Skunk Central round the corner. And I think they've put them in either 440ml bottles or 500. 8%. Jesus, that's not going to go down well. But there you go. That looks really nice. Tightly packed, white head, uniform bubbles. That is... yeah, you cannot see that. And of course, their beers are unpasteurised and unfiltered as well. And it really does smell nice. Really does smell like that Foreign Extra. And that's a lovely beer, that Foreign Extra. If you can get that in your local supermarket, watch my review on it and then try some. It's fantastic. It really is good. Anyway, let's stop gassing and let's get this down my fat Gregory Peck. Bottoms up. Oh, that is lovely. Oh, the bitterness on the finish. That roasted malt. Oh, this is a good one. This is really nice. And again, I'm going to compare it with another stout, and that is the Shepherd Neame Double Stout. That's got really intense flavours, and I think this is rivaling it for its bitterness. Them roasted malts really do stand out on that finish. And it's like, if you've ever tried 100% cocoa, dark chocolate, that intense bitterness that you get on it, I mean, it really is intense. In fact, when I do eat that dark chocolate, that intense dark chocolate, I only take one square at a time. It's just too intense, and there's no way on earth I could finish a whole bar of that stuff. It's just way too flavour intense and rich. And that's exactly how I would describe that. And at 5%, you could have knocked me down with a feather. That tastes a hell of a lot stronger. Maybe the bitterness is doing that for me. This is I'd say this is at cellar temperature. I left it in the fridge, but I've taken it out quite quickly, and it's just perfect cellar temperature. And it does taste a bit like it's come off a draft pump. There is a slight fizz to it. It's not as smooth as Guinness. Guinness has got nitro in it. This hasn't got any nitro in it, as you can see from them bubbles. And again, that's another thing that's putting me in mind of the Shepherd Neame Double Stout. Oh, this is good. This is really good. This is a really intense Belgian stout. Now, one thing I will say about this, I think they've got it right putting it in a 330ml bottle, because I do remember drinking the Shepherd Neame stuff, and that was 500ml, and at the end of it I didn't want to drink anything else, not because it filled me up or anything, but because the flavours were so intense. I don't know, maybe it's just me, maybe it's just the way my constitution is, but I was just like, I've had me fill now. That has done my flavour fix for the day. It was that intense. And this is what I'm being reminded of here. It's perfect. Carbonation, I think, is spot on. It's a bit different to your draft Guinness in a can, in that it's way more flavour intense, but there is carbonation in there. I would compare this to the Foreign Extra Stout. I would potentially put money on it that they have put a nod to the Guinness Foreign Extra Stout with this. And I doubt that, well, I'm saying I doubt it, they probably have. If they've tried the Shepherd Neame Double Stout, they're rivaling that for flavour intensity. This is great. I can't emphasise how much I like this. This is a really good one. It's just full of flavour. And that finish is just pure dark chocolate, roasted malt, and it just lingers and lingers. Quite a late finish, actually. Oh, it's so good. And I've caned loads of it already, and I really should stop, because I'm going to do that and the review won't even be finished. I'm going to leave it down there and I'll get on to the next section. So what is the verdict on Brasserie de la Senne Stouterik? Well, I didn't really have any opinion on this. I've just seen they've called this a Belgian dry stout. Yeah, that's a pretty good description. By dry, they mean bitter. I didn't really have an opinion on this, and I just thought, the reason I did it, I wanted to highlight the heritage of stout in Belgium. And I was using this as a vehicle to do it. And I didn't really think much. I thought, oh yeah, it's quite a nice stout, 7 out of 10, blah, blah, blah. But that is outstanding. They really have pulled out all the stops and brewed a stout there, which I think rivals the Guinness Foreign Extra. One thing I will say, this is not your normal Guinness. This is like Guinness on steroids. And it does question whether some people may not like it. That bitterness and that flavour intensity may be too much for them. It's very rich. It's not really a session beer. I could see myself being quite satisfied after 2 glasses of that, or 2 bottles I should say, and it may put people off. The bitterness on that may put people off. But if you're a craft beer fan and you like your craft brewed stouts, this is fantastic. It's not a milk stout by any stretch of the imagination. This is the exact opposite. It's not sweet, it's bitter, very bitter. In fact, as I said in the previous section, this rivals the Shepherd Neame Double Stout, which I thought couldn't be beaten for bitterness. But I'm really liking it. This is fantastic. Love it. And for that reason, I'm going to give that a 10 out of 10. I think that's great. This is one of them beers that it just emphasises everything that is good about a certain style, and this is doing it for stout. Now, stout and porter, you can argue the semantics about what the differences are, but for me, an Irish stout does have certain characteristics, and if you're going to copy an Irish stout, of course, it's got to be Guinness, hasn't it? And that is a worthy contender, believe me. So that is 10 out of 10. That is definitely recommended if you can get hold of some. And good luck, because if more people find out about this, this isn't going to last long. And remember, beer is working class champagne.